Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Take Two. So in this episode, I kind of got what I wanted because I was like, yeah, this episode's got to come up, obviously, because obviously it's got mentioned in the story, and that is we get introduced to Sam's ex, Dylan, who, interestingly enough, he's played by the actor who, I think the thing I best know him from is playing Clay from Bitten, so that's cool. Which we actually got to see the breakup in this episode because Berto shows it to Monica, and I'm like, man, that was kind of brutal. It's not only did she find out, like, oh yeah, like, because I don't remember it ever came up like, oh, he was cheating on her, but it's kind of like, oh yeah, like, it was kind of public. It's like, oh, she had to find out from like a tabloid, a place called Tabloid Junkie, like, oh yeah, like, you seen somewhere else? And then Sam was like, I thought you said you were going to be like, blah blah blah, you said you're going to be X and here you are at Y, like what's going on here? It's like, what talking about is, and then like he blew up at her and just kind of like, I'm done with all this, I'm done with you, and I broke up with her in front of all the cameras and stuff like that. She did say he kind of dumped her on like the red carpet and stuff like that, but still, it's kind of very brutal. And then in retrospect, it's kind of like, yeah, you're surprised. It's no surprise that she just wants to punch him in the face. I love every time she gets a chance. Like, she just kind of like, she's so disgusted and pissed off seeing him. Especially when we find out the reason why he came. I did not expect that to be the reason why they came together. It's like, okay, so the reason why I'm here is because, on some of the stuff they stole on one particular laptop, there's still some, and she's like, no, that's not possible, because you told me you deleted that, you idiot. I was like, wow, and once again, it's just kind of interesting because, like, I mean, let's not forget, this is kind of like supposed to be kind of like, oh, I mean, I think that is kind of like an actor and actress type of worry, you know, and it's kind of interesting that ended up being the centerfold of the story. I mean, at least that kind of ended up being the first leg of everything, so I thought that was kind of interesting. And I love how Eddie had to constantly stop her from just beating the crap out of him for it. And I love at first he is kind of a little douchey because at first it's more so about him. The first thought is kind of like, yeah, this might ruin my career. It's like, what about me after the state her career is in right now? Like, she can't take another hit, like, you know, a sex tape getting released, which he's like, well, that's why I'm here. But see, it's like, the fact of the matter is you said it like that. You're like, it's like, no, you made it seem more about like, well, my career's more important. And at the very least, I guess in some retrospect, it kind of makes sense because it's like, well, later on you find out he's doing charity work and stuff like that. And he's trying to like be better than he was. So that's what he was more so worried about. But I think at the same time, like, this was all in its, I mean, to be fair, it was all an excuse to kind of meet up with Sam again too. So, and I just love the whole thing about Eddie trying to make her feel better. It's like, no, we'll get it, don't worry about it. And he's just like, and after we get it, then we'll kill your ex and I'll help you bury it. And it's just kind of like you see Sam getting all like happy about it and stuff. I love that. And then there's also going back to the house. It's like, oh, I haven't been here. You know, last time I was here, we were, you know, engaged. And it's like, well, yeah, also the last time you were here, you set his, you know, bed on fire. And she's just kind of like, yes, but still, you know, it's like, wow, I forgot that little nugget of a detail that she did do that, didn't she? And I love that, like, because I do love that the crime ended up being kind of twofold. That one part of it was like, all right, it was like someone who stole the laptop, and then something else entirely because like the security footage, SD cards were stolen. Turns out the thief behind all of this, like at least the laptop at first, was this kid named Zeke. And it's like, oh yeah, he's a fan and everything. And she's like, if you're a real fan, you wouldn't want to see me like suffer or whatever. He's like, no, I'd never do anything to hurt you, you know, Sam. But this is business. I'm like, you little punk. I love it. And he's just kind of like, okay. It's like, so how much is for it? It's like $25,000 is what he's selling it to Tabloid Junkie. And she's like, what? It's like, that's it? It's like, what? It's like, she's like, I kind of was hoping it'd be a little bit more. It's like, fine, we'll give you $30,000. It's like $35,000. And Eddie's like, well, does that make you feel better now that just jacking up the price for it? But like I said, I love that this started off with just that, but it snowballs into something else because it turns out it's like, oh man, like this might be connected to offshore accounts, $42 million, definitely drugs being involved in everything. And it's kind of like, oh, all of it points to Dylan. And it's kind of interesting because we're in that little, like, Sam's in that compromised position because she's like, she has her past with Dylan, obviously she's still mad at him and everything, but her and him kind of found like, you know, they were kind of going back to a good place because like he apologized and everything. I mean, to be fair, she didn't know if it was sincere or not, but at the same time, it was just kind of like she wanted to believe him. And it's kind of even interesting because even Eddie, obviously he took like, because Dylan was like, no, to prove my innocence, I'm gonna hire you guys. And he took the case because he did it more so for Sam, because he knows for Sam, it's like, she needs to find out before, like whether or not, like, because he could tell that Sam and Dylan were kind of hitting it off again. And if they potentially went down that route again, he'd want her to know the whole situation with Dylan. But even Eddie kind of gave him the benefit of doubt on some parts. It's like, because he sees that Sam's so worried about it, but he's like, no, like, I've been dealing with people who I thought were 100% guilty, and then it turns out they were kind of innocent. So the same thing could apply here. What I thought was kind of so interesting was like, I wasn't expecting the FBI to kind of get involved, like them, like, oh man, they checked the crates and it's like, oh, there's drugs here. But then Sam's like, oh, I definitely know that Dylan's innocent now. But it's like, wasn't expecting the FBI to show up. Like, it's like, ooh, I was like, you kind of got smack dab in the middle of like a sting operation and stuff. And so it's kind of shitty the way they were kind of talking to Sam and stuff like that. They were just kind of like, oh, you being part of the drug game, you being kind of like, almost kind of making it seem like, well, you're kind of a failed actress, so it's kind of like you and your experience with drugs and stuff like that. Like, it's like, oh, the fact that she showed up and everything. It's like, it's not like you're giving her the benefit of the doubt. You're just kind of like, oh yeah. Even the dude that was grilling Eddie is kind of like, oh yeah, you kind of left a cloud behind when you left the LA, when he left being a cop, and it's just kind of like, oh yeah, it's kind of expected with this type of life and stuff like that you kind of potentially turn to like being some kind of drug kingpin or something. That's like, wow, that's kind of a dick move on both your parts, but okay. And luckily he was able to kind of circumvent a lot of that by calling in Chris for a favor to kind of get them like out of that situation. Turns out, long story short, it ends up being his manager, Brock. And I do like that earlier in the episode, like, Brock is like, oh, Sam can't be anywhere near Dylan because Dylan's got his own situation to deal with. Like, we want to get this whole sex tape situation kind of handled, get him prepared for it. You being here, you're just kind of like a disaster zone, like, And then Eddie's like, whoa, don't try and blame her. Like, let's not forget that none of this is on her. Like, she's not the one that dumped him on the red carpet in front of a whole bunch of people. She's not the one that kept this sex tape and kind of create this current situation, which I thought was so, and you can see Sam kind of smiling because, it's just like him sticking up for her like that. And just, he's very protective of her. I thought that was super sweet. Yeah, but it turns out Brock wasn't one behind all of this just because he was like using the charity that Dylan was using as a front for him to kind of funnel money and do run drugs and stuff like that. So, I mean, the moment Dylan was kind of like being like, oh man, like someone, I was like, oh man, is Dylan like that? But oh, that'd be kind of crazy and kind of sad if that was the case. When I was like, nah, Dylan's being framed. It's like, if it was going to be anyone, it's going to be Brock. Dude's kind of a douchebag anyway. So it's kind of like, because I was wondering how they were going to go about that situation. I was like, because like they don't want to turn the laptop over, because if they turn the laptop over, that means all of its content will have to be put on public record. That even means the sex tape would have to come out. But Dylan didn't want to do that because it's like, it would mean like he doesn't want to do that to Sam. But Sam is like, no, like if it means clearing Dylan's name, then she'll kind of make that sacrifice. But luckily they didn't have to worry about that because they confronted Brock, and I was like, okay, so what did that accomplish? And it's like, oh, they got Zeke to steal it. I'm like, wow. Tell me, are we going to see more of him? Is he going to kind of be on a payroll or something like that? I doubt it. Like, he's a teenager and stuff like that, I assume. So it's kind of like, that's probably not going to happen. But I mean, he exists within the canon. So maybe it's like, hey, maybe we'll kind of see him more potentially. I don't know. Maybe it's just kind of a one-off thing. I mean, he's very skilled at what he does. So I guess maybe he'll come back up later on in the story or not. I don't know. But it was kind of interesting. And I kind of figured this was going to happen. Like, Chris and Eddie had that moment in the episode where Chris is kind of like, yeah, you should probably, essentially saying like, oh, you should date Sam. It's like, what? Nothing's happening between me and Sam. But she's like, the way you light up, like working with her. And also, and I kind of figured this as much as too, and she kind of says it. It's like, the thing between us always works because we're honest. It's like, he never once told Chris what was going on. He was handling it all. And the fact, and because he did it to protect Sam. Like, she's like, I understand what you did, why you did it. And it's just kind of like, yeah, like I can tell that essentially she brings out something in you I haven't seen in a long time. Like, because, Eddie, I think, had become a bit disenchanted, I'm sure, just because of his experiences as, like, leaving his cop life behind and becoming a PI, just like, but Sam kind of gave him a new view on things that he probably hadn't had in such a long time. Because probably when Chris looks at Eddie now, she probably sees a lot of the Eddie she probably knew in the past too. So, I mean, part of me always kind of felt like, oh, is that what they're kind of setting this up to be? I mean, it happened faster than I thought it would. But I was like, oh, but it's kind of like, oh, what about the whole Chris and him? It's like, no, Chris is kind of already pointing it out herself, like, because he's like, nothing's happening between us. It's like, well, maybe something should. She's like, I'm at the very least, she's like, I'm like saying like, don't kind of get it like, completely denounce the thought. It's kind of interesting just because for her, because it did seem like it was more of a, like I said, it just seemed like it was more like a casual thing, because it's not like she's kind of like hurt. But like I said, you can look at the way she looked when Eddie walked away and stuff like that. Like I said, just what she wasn't getting the full story. Like before, he would have probably told her everything about what was going on, but now it's just kind of like, which, like I said, she completely understands. So I thought that was kind of fascinating. I mean, it also seems like it's not like necessarily like Dylan and Sam are going to get back together either, because for him, he's like, do you ever think there's going to be a way back for us? Which she doesn't really give him a response. She just says good luck to him. Because for her, it's just kind of like, and it's something he says, like, they're two different people now. Like, who they were back then, it's like they've kind of both moved on with their lives. And it's just kind of like she's doing the whole PI thing and doing better. He's doing better too, so. I also love it too that it isn't just Sam. Even Dylan had those moments in this episode where he kind of gets caught up in his own career, because his what was it that tabloid dude had said that bothered him? I forgot what it was. He was just kind of like, what, he said that about me. It was something negative about him as an actor. He's like, wait, what? I think he even uses like, what was it, like one of the passwords or something was something from one of his movies, and he's like, well, that movie paid for this house and stuff like that. It's just kind of interesting, because we take like tiptoes in that world a little bit, that world of acting for Sam, because it's kind of interesting, even though that's a big part of her life. Obviously the PI work ends up being the biggest part. Like I expected it. I kind of thought maybe it'd be more of a juggling act. I mean, at least for now, it doesn't seem like that's the case. So I don't know, it's just kind of an interesting perspective on the, with the show. But what I thought was kind of pretty neat too at the end is you do see that Sam is potentially feeling that too, because she's kind of looking at Eddie, because Eddie is like, oh yeah, like I didn't look at the sex tape, or I love all the people she was running down, like, oh my god, they're going to say, she's like, even her 5th grade teacher, she's like, he said I wouldn't amount to anything, he's definitely going to watch the sex tape if it gets leaked. It's like, oh, my parents, probably my sister definitely will, which is just weird that's in your thought. Like, yeah, which I'm surprised we haven't met your sister. I think this is the first time we brought up the fact is like kind of talked about her family. I'm surprised at that. I mean, yeah, we got introduced to her ex, so maybe her family's gonna come up, and her mom and dad and or sister might come up in the story. We'll have to wait and see. I also love too, like, just kind of a little thing, but Monica thinking like, oh yeah, like, kind of treating herself as one of the employees there. It's like, aren't you kind of like, isn't this just kind of like a temporary thing for you? She's like, well, yeah, but like, I pretty much figured like you guys kind of need my help and expertise, which comes in handy in this episode too, because she recognizes the tattoo that Omar has and kind of leads to, and I love the whole, like, she's like, yeah, I've got tattoos by that same artist all over my body in certain places that came, and you see Berta just kind of looking at her leg and stuff like that, and just trying not to look at stuff like that. I love that. I'm very interested to kind of see where all of this kind of takes us going forward, especially the whole Sam and Eddie thing, like whether will they kind of act upon that. Like I said, you can kind of tell they're both kind of into each other, and their current situation is kind of like, oh, like, that window is open, or rather the door is open, and just who's going to step through first, or like what's going to happen, so we're just going to have to wait and see. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good